To start, some quick Zoom reminders. If you're calling in, please mute your phone. If you do not have a dedicated mute button, pressing *6 should mute your phone. If you're using a computer audio, all participants have been muted. During the question and answer session, you will be able to unmute yourself to ask a question. You can also enter your questions into the chat and we'll read your questions out loud. We also invite those of you who are able to access the chat on Zoom to introduce yourself.
These hostages were not released and a deal wasn't.
Second slide, Lori. We acknowledge that everywhere we live and work is Indigenous lands, and our team is located all across the state. One of our offices was located on the traditional homelands of the Lower Dena'ina people in interior Alaska. Our offices are physically located on Trothyeta, meaning Indian Potato Ridge campus at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Traditional chief Peter John from Minto shared the story of this ridge in the 1990s, and the official name was changed in 2013. We also have team members located in Shaktoolik, Quinnipiac, and Anchorage. The third slide, Lori. We often work as a team together. Here's a quick picture of a lot of the folks we work to provide support as part of the learning network. The fourth slide. The intent of the Alaska Tribal Resilience Learning Network, aka TRLN, to create a community of learning, sharing, technical assistance, training, and support for Alaska tribes and Indigenous communities as they respond and adapt to the current future impacts of climate change. There are several different ways you can participate in the learning network in addition to participating in these information sessions. These include signing up for individual community check-ins, signing up for the monthly e-bulletin, and attending any of our trainings. Okay, go to the next slide. And today I have Genevieve Rock, who is the development coordinator for the Native Village of Shaktoolik, and also Isaac Pearson, a Bristol engineer from Bristol Engineering. Now, if you guys want to introduce yourself real quick.
Yeah, good afternoon or good morning, everybody, depending on where you're at. My name is Isaac Pearson. I am a senior civil engineer with Bristol Engineering, located in Anchorage. I've been an engineer with Bristol for about a little over 20 years now. I've had the pleasure of working in Shaktoolik for about the last decade, so I'm really excited to be here and chat through this with Jolene. So very excited. Thank you.
And good morning, everyone. My name is Genevieve Rock. I'm the development coordinator for the Native Village of Shaktoolik. And I recently was hired as the RMP coordinator. I would like to apologize. I do not have video, but I am here with audio.
So thank you both. Today we'll be presenting on the efforts that Shaktoolik has been doing to protect in place. So Shaktoolik, where will our future lead us? And this is where we are located. We are on the Norton Sound. And as you can see here, our village is between the Dagumanik River and the Bering Sea. We have some of our major infrastructure on the ocean side. So we labeled some of those. Go to the next one. So we are an Inupiaq community. We've had continuous habitation in this area for as long as oral history tells us. Shaktoolik was the first and southernmost Malamute settlement on the Norton Sound, occupied as early as 1839. The village was originally located 6 miles up the Shaktoolik River and moved to the mouth of the river in 1933, which is the old site. In 1967, Shaktoolik moved to its present site where we are today. And here is some of our sources we have. We had, I don't know if Jenna or Isaac want to talk about this one.
Yeah, I'll help you out there since Jenna, well, Jenna can probably see it, but yeah, the map kind of shows all of Shaktoolik in all of its glory, I guess. And what is really interesting to observe about Shaktoolik's location is that it is isolated to this spit of land that's bound by the Bering Sea, bound by the river estuaries from the Shaktoolik and Tugumik River. So it makes it a pretty precarious place when we start talking about localized flooding and erosion that come particularly as part of the fall storms, which Jolene will talk about later. Some really interesting things to note, or some things that we're going to talk about later, is you'll notice up in the upper left-hand corner of the page, we identify Cape Demby. This is a possible rock source that the community, it's within the tribal boundaries, I would say, I guess. And so it's a potential rock source that we're looking at for the community for protection measures. And some other really interesting things on here is the map shows where the community was originally located up the Shaktoolik River. That's their original site. And then you'll notice down on the ocean side, where they moved down to what the community refers to as the old site. And as Jolene mentioned, in like 1967, the community moved from the old site to their new site in Shaktoolik, where it's showing now. And they just moved out a little farther down the spit. In some of our meetings, what was really interesting about this to us, in some of our meetings, community meetings and information gathering that we had, when Shaktoolik was forced with the decision to move from the old site because they were seeing a lot of localized flooding and erosion there as well, they brought the decision to the community, and it was actually a community vote. And the way that I understand it, that the elders talked about it, and Jenna, please correct me if I'm wrong, but they gave everybody in the community the opportunity to vote that was like over 18. They said older people, so I don't think kids necessarily decided. But the point that I'm trying to say here is that when they made the community vote to move, it was only by one vote that the community elected to move out farther on the spit as opposed to farther inland. So I thought that was a really kind of a fascinating little piece of oral history that they provided when we were talking about all this. So another really interesting part, or something that we're going to talk about later, is down on the bottom right-hand corner is first and second bend. So as Shaktoolik is located out on the spit, it's bound by rivers on, the ocean and the rivers. They only have one egress point out of the community, and that's traveling along the beach. And this first and second bend becomes very dangerous, or it's at risk, I guess, from coastal storms, and that the coastal storms could breach through the little bit of sand spit that's left there and basically make Shaktoolik an island. So the first and second bend stuff is always on the forefront of our mind when we're talking about coastal erosion and flooding in the community. So, and if Jenna has anything she would like to add to that.
I think you covered it all, Isaac. You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Lori, could go to the next slide. So, facing climate change, the everyday lives and traditions of people in the region are now being threatened by the impacts of climate change. For example, higher average temperatures are associated with later freeze up of sea and shore ice, and the ice that does form is generally thinner than in decades past. During the fall storms, if ice is not in place, waves build up and cause significant damage to the shoreline. Over the years, with the sea ice declining, Shaktoolik has been more vulnerable with each fall storm. Shaktoolik was ranked #1 on the statewide threat assessment, identification of threats from erosion, flooding, and thawing permafrost in remote Alaska communities, dated November 2019. And to give an example, on January 13, Gary Pekolik provided this video of the winds that we had recently, where we didn't have any ice in front of the village where we usually have. Historically, the ice would form by October, but keep safe. So in recent years, that would have been covered at least by slush or ice by this time of the year. I don't know if Isaac or Jenna want to talk about this.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that. So I think one of the important things here that Jolene mentioned is the later formation of sea ice that traditionally had protected the community during the fall storms that come through. And I think as we all know, this problem is not unique to Shaktoolik. This occurs in many northern regions throughout Alaska. So this is, it's this lack of sea ice in the fall when they get their traditional really big storms that's one of the things that is speeding up erosion or increasing flooding in the community or making them more at risk. So.
And one thing that I would like to add is that over the recent years, we've been very fortunate when we do not have that ice out in front of the village to protect us, that there is a slush berm that protects us a little bit from these fall storms. But without that slush, and as you can see in the video, Shaktoolik is very, very vulnerable to these fall storms. And luckily, we have had what we call a slush berm that does protect us when we do not have that ocean ice.
The next slide. So some of the fall storms we had, considerable coastline erosion occurred during the storms in 2003, 2004, and 2005. In September 2005, there was a flood that brought in piles of driftwood along the coastline. The airport had debris floating on the apron, threatening the use of the runway. In 2013, storm driftwood was piled into the backyards of the homes on the ocean side. Leadership realized that with each storm, they were becoming more frequent and more fiercer. So the community of Shaktoolik decision to protect in place. The community of Shaktoolik considered numerous near and long-term strategies to adapt to the climate-related threats, included the eventual relocation of the village to higher ground. However, due to the challenging logistics, high costs, and limited funding available for village relocations, Shaktoolik embraced a more immediate and less costly solution, building a vegetated berm along the coast of the village to help keep the village safe. The community chose to protect in place circa 2010. Go to the next one. Taking local action. In 2014, the city of Shaktoolik received a grant from OES to build a berm in front of the village to protect the community from the fall storm waves. The following year, the city received funding from the Norton Sound Economic Development Corporation and a CDC to help repair and make the berm bigger. After realizing that this method worked, the native village of Shaktoolik IRA Council looked for grant funding to help keep the berm project going. In 2018, the tribe hired a community coordinator to help support ongoing efforts to protect the community. The community was proactive and began this on their own. The triorg, which consists of the city, corp, and tribe, was engaged in the process. And Jenna, did you have anything you want to add?
Yes, I would like to mention that our triorg consists of the executive board members from our three local organizations, which are the tribe, the city, and the corporation. Our triorg meets quarterly or as needed, and all meetings are open to the public.
So we have the berm history. In 2014 is when the city of Shaktoolik received a OES grant to build the berm to protect the village. In 2015, the city received NSCDC funds to repair the berm and make it bigger. In 2016, the tribe received emergency Denali Commission funds to repair the berm. And in 2019, the tribe hired a coordinator to help keep the berm project going. In 2019, the tribe received NIFWIF funds to repair and vegetate the berm. In 2020, the tribe received HUD funds to repair the berm in front of the village and also the river bends at first and second bend. And then in 22, Typhoon Merbok destroyed our berm. Better than
Okay, so I would like to spend a little bit of time explaining how the berm works and kind of how we got here. So Jolene had mentioned that the city had constructed the berm, in 2014. So they did this of their own accord. And then so eventually the tribe got involved, and because the tribe was better suited to help maintain the berm. And one of the first actions that the tribe did was to work with engineers, specifically Bristol, to take the concept that the community used to build the berm, which was piling up driftwood, local driftwood and sand to create this barrier. So one of the things that, in order to continuously receive funding to do this, the tribe asked Bristol through, I believe it was through a grant through the Denali Commission, to help make the berm a tangible thing for agencies to fund. And what I mean by that is we did a plan set and plans and specifications that guided the construction of the berm, which the community already did. So it was kind of backwards. But we developed these plans and specifications, and also secured rights of way or easements to construct the berm. And having these pieces in place, these official engineering documents, that allowed, or that opened the funding opportunities for some of these subsequent actions. And some of that would not have been possible unless we had checked all the boxes for the engineering design, for the right of way, or for the site control for the berm. And then also there is an environmental component that went with that to make sure that the berm met all the requirements of NEPA, which is typically required for federal funding efforts. So it was kind of cool. And so one of the really neat things about the berm and how it works is the community did this themselves. So what happens when the big storms come through? Jolene mentioned that the driftwood comes in and gets piled up in the community. So that driftwood, most of that stuff is actually from the Yukon River. And so all that wood comes out from the Yukon. It sits out in the Bering Sea in these big rafts. There's these huge floating rafts of wood. And then when the storms come through, when these fall storms, southerly storms come in, they blow all that driftwood onto Shaktoolik's beach and others. So it becomes the storms are very dangerous for many reasons, but one of the reasons why they were particularly concerned in Shaktoolik is the storm events would pick up the driftwood and then make them projectiles. And so they were seeing this driftwood, these big hard objects being thrown into the community. And so the berm, although put in place to help with the flooding, it was also meant to be a barrier to protect from the driftwood that came into the community and caused significant damage. So the berm itself is called a soft erosion feature. It's built out of sand and the driftwood that I mentioned before. From an engineering standpoint, a soft erosion feature is something that is intended to be damaged or destroyed during a storm event. So the purpose of the facility itself, or the berm, is to essentially take energy away from the storm or the waves as they come through and the debris. But as a result of that, the berm gets destroyed and kind of falls apart. So it becomes this continuous cycle of rebuilding. As the berm is destroyed with with major storm events, the community has to go back and reconstruct the berm. What is really neat about Shaktoolik is that they are able to reconstruct this berm using their local labor and equipment. So this is all Shaktoolik that does this. This is not contractors that come in. The only contractors are Bristol, providing administrative support, so to speak, and helping them with paperwork and grants and stuff like that. But essentially all the construction and all that is done by Shaktoolik. So over the years, we have noticed that, or since Shaktoolik is so good at doing this work, they have the wherewithal to do it themselves. But what they didn't have was the proper equipment to do it. So in the past, when they first started the build the berm, they were using some very old World War II era dump trucks that were Army surplus that they had forever, and they made it all work. But we recognized that Shaktoolik needed more help. And so what we did is we went in and we started applying for grants to get them more equipment to support in their berm construction efforts, so to support them locally. And the first major victory in that was a National Fish and Wildlife grant that allowed the community to purchase 2 articulated dump trucks and a water truck. And that was just such a huge help. And then very recently, actually this spring, Shaktoolik received the delivery from an EPA Swiffer grant, and they were able to get 5 new pieces of equipment. That included and I might miss something, but that included a new excavator, a skid steer, a compactor. I feel like there were some other things there, but all very, very neat stuff for Shaktoolik, and that really helped them out a lot. I would like to, I guess the last thing I want to say about the berm is the berm itself is up. It's, I mentioned that it was a soft erosion feature, but it's also high and dry in that the berm itself is not under the water or does not get touched by water unless there's a significant storm event that comes through. So on most days, the berm is just this big, beautiful thing that sits out in front of the community, and people play on top of it, and it's kind of a really neat thing. So anyhow, that's, I think, all I got on that.
Better than excited. So prior to Murbach, our berm was complete. We just had maybe a week or 2 left that needed. And so in September 22, Typhoon Murbach hit our community. And I just wanted to quote, "The disaster confirmed what many elders and engineers have said for years. The people of Shaktoolik must relocate to higher ground and quickly." And that was quoted by Stephen Lezak. So like Isaac said, a lot of the driftwood comes into our community and it just piles onto the side of the ocean. So in September 2022, Typhoon Murbach hit our community. Within hours, the berm was completely destroyed. Coastal erosion took 3 to 5 feet and created a wood drift pile along the old airport road. The road at the first and second bend saw significant damage, and the Murbach reinforced the need to understand community migration. So I just wanted to show you a before and after, and this was a picture of the berm on 9/15/22, and then Murbach came through and It was completely destroyed within hours. And we like to give photo credit to Gloria Andrew for the awesome photos that she takes. I'm sure Isaac or Jenna, did you want to talk?
No, I guess I will just say, as we kind of go through these photos slowly, you'll notice the timelines that these photos were taken. So we had done our final inspection on the berm only a few days before Merbach hit. So it was quite incredible to go out there and look at the berm. And as I mentioned, it was really beautiful. And you could see from some of these pictures how nice it was. And then after Merbach happened, Bristol mobilized back to Shaktoolik to help them with the disaster relief, and just to go through and see what Merbach did. And so something that was really interesting or kind of eye-opening with Merbach is we had a lot of active studies going on at the time that Merbach happened, but particularly a big berm upgrades project where we could understand how to upgrade the berm. So the coastal engineers had models built to help understand the storm events and stuff like that. And when we got the data from the Merbach event, the coastal engineers put that back into their models. And what was really surprising to us in the community was that when we look at the flood or the wave, when we talk about storms in the coastal engineering world, we look at two things, probably among many others. I'm not a coastal engineer, full disclosure, but I just pay attention to them when they talk. But we'd look a lot at wave run up. That's one of the things that we look at for the coastal storms. And then we look at still water flooding. Those are two kind of individual things. And when they analyzed the Merbach event, the wave run up only came back as a 20-year probability or a 20-year event. And if you pay attention to reoccurrence intervals, when we talk about natural disasters, they quite often talk about them as this a 10-year event, a 20, a 50, a 100-year event. Most things in the engineering world, we try to design for a 100-year event. But what was really shocking for the Merbach was that the wave run up was only, according to the models, was only about a 20-year fell within the spectrum of a 20-year reoccurrence interval, as did the flooding. So the takeaway from that was that Merbach was not the biggest storm that could happen in Shaktoolik, and we hope that nothing ever happens bigger, but there is probabilities that larger storms could happen. So it became very obvious very fast that while the berm is good, it does really good work. It saved the community in Merbach, there's no doubt. But something better needs to be done. I mean, it reinforced the importance of continuing to look at protecting the community, both in a protect in place status and then helping to understand the need for a planned migration out of this site. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later.
So these are the before and after Merbach. We had some behind the ABAC building, which is the first picture. The second photo and the third photo is our school and the water plant. And these are down at the the old site, what we call the old site where Shaktoolik was located before we are today.
I would like to point out in the first picture with the house, in 3 days, we lost that much land. Erosion.
And again, these are just before and after photos at the old site. And again, we'd like to thank Gloria Andrew for these photos that she provides. And
Is the berm working? Overall, the berm is protecting the community and the infrastructure from fall storm surges and waves. While it seems that millions of dollars are being wasted by maintaining the berm each year, it is not. By doing this measure, we are protecting our people and our homes. Without the berm, the piles of driftwood that come in with the fall waves, excuse me, would no doubt cause damage to the homes on the ocean side. And when Murbach hit, I had huge logs hitting the back of my house. So we utilized our own resources as a community. We came together and began the proactive stages of protecting our community by building the gravel berm. Isaac?
Yep. Thank you. Yeah, and I would like to also kind of echo what Jenna said about is the berm working. You know, on the surface, when the community sees the berm being destroyed every time, it can be pretty disheartening, I guess, you know, to be in the community and see this destroyed, and then you rebuild it, and it just seems like this endless cycle. But as I had mentioned before, the berm itself is a soft erosion feature, and that is its intent, is to take the brunt of the storm as opposed to the community infrastructure taking the brunt of the storm. So while it doesn't appear that it is working, it is working very good and working as intended. Now moving into the protecting in place. So what we wanted to demonstrate here about what Shaktoolik is doing to protect in place. I wanted to bring forward kind of the administrative and the planning actions that Shaktoolik does. And this is by no means an all-inclusive list of everything that Shaktoolik has done to protect in place, nor their administrative actions, but just some stuff that really highlights the importance of this. So from the first standpoint, or the administrative action, you'll notice that they have a small community emergency response plan, or a SCRP, with drills. And they also have a multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan approved through FEMA. So both of these are very important plans. The first plan itself, a SCRP, if you're not familiar with it, what it is a plan that's designed, it's a very simple plan that's designed to be used by a community in times of a disaster. So it has, when the disaster hit, it is essentially a playbook that leadership can flip through. It tells them all the proper people to call. It tells them what their emergency measures are, like where are people to go if they need to evacuate, what they're supposed to do, if there's damages, who to call. I mean, it's just a very, very powerful tool. And this is something that I believe any community that is currently protecting in place and needs to be ready to deal with the disaster, this is the very critical document for them to have, any community, because that does help them get through that immediate need, like when the disaster hits. And, you know, one thing that we have to remember is, or I guess me personally, is that when we think that we're always prepared for the disaster,
the news. So we're back on the
when stuff starts happening very quickly, all the stuff that we have in our mind that we could do or should do kind of can leave you when you go into this panic stage and stuff happens. And some people are better at maintaining themselves through disasters than others. But it is, my point being is that it's very, very helpful to have this book where you can go through and it's a step-by-step, everybody's scared, lots of things are going on, but this really guides the community to help through this disaster event. Very, very important to have that emergency response capability within the community. So beyond the emergency response that happens during a disaster, Shaktoolik has been very active in gathering plans and data that will help them understand, helps them understand what's going on. And we hear this a lot from communities, that they feel like they kind of get planned to death. I mean, it's planning after planning after planning, which I would agree with. I mean, when you look at Shaktoolik's planning list, and again, this is not an all-inclusive list, you'll see that it's since 2007, they've been planning all sorts of stuff, but it doesn't seem like anything really ever happens, you know? So we get this feedback from the community about that we're just being planned to death. Let's see some action. And And the planning is a very important step or stage in any capital improvement project and moving the community. I mean, and what I mean by capital improvement project is building a facility or something like that. The movement or retreat of a community is just a bunch of capital improvement projects that are together that makes that migration happen. So what I did find really interesting about Shaktoolik's planning horizon, or the stuff that they did in the past, is as you look through these reports, there's been reports happening since 2007, and a lot of them are government reports. So like reports from the Corps of Engineers, from these other people that are government agencies writing reports. So what tends to happen if the community doesn't have a localized coordination effort like Shaktoolik has now with their community coordinator or their tribal, their community coordinator position, quite often these reports get generated, they get lost in the mix of all the rest of the reports. There's not always a champion in the community that can guide this stuff forward, because once most agencies come and help a community, like the Corps of Engineers doing a flood study, they deliver the flood study and walk away. They don't stay there and help. They're done. Their job is done. So what is really important, in my opinion, as a community is working through this planning, especially for something like this, where the eventual migration, it's really important to have these lasting partnerships with agencies like ANTHC, and this is Alaska based, but like ANTHC, who is always there for the community. And one thing that has been very helpful for Shaktoolik is they've employed professional consultants, and that would be Bristol. We've been working with them for over 10 years now. And what that allows, the professional consultants, although the community has to pay for them, they do help everything stay organized. They help keep momentum in projects. They help pull stuff together as these planning documents come out. They identify projects that need to happen. And then so once a project is identified, typically the next step is trying to figure out how we're going to fund it. So that those partnerships can help these planning documents build into the next steps. And so again, really important to have these partnerships as we go on. One thing that I wanted to bring out in this big old planning list is one of the most important, they're all very important, but one of the more important documents or planning documents that we have received in the recent past is the Climate Change and Vulnerability Risk Assessment developed in 2002 or 2020, excuse me. And that is fondly referred to in the community as the Golder Report, because Golder developed it. They're an engineering or a professional firm in Alaska, or they're nationwide at the time. But that Climate Change and Vulnerability Risk Assessment report that Golder did really had provided a lot of extremely valuable information to the community, specifically as it relates to their decision to protect in place versus beginning the migration. And I will talk about that a little bit later. Yes, another really interesting one that we have done recently is the resiliency assessment and conceptual design upgrades for the berm. So this is where we have the soft erosion berm. It is out of reach typically for most funders to do a full hard rock in front of Shaktoolik, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But what's really neat about this resiliency risk assessment and conceptual design is it provided some low-cost alternatives to help stabilize the berm in the near term as the community is working on either soliciting more funding to reinforce the berm or that migration effort. So very, very cool reports. Can we have the next slide, please? So in addition to all the planning efforts, and I should have mentioned that there's some engineering design in there somewhere that gets us in between planning and construction, but some of the big construction efforts that Shaktoolik has been doing to protect in place includes the equipment acquisition, which I had discussed earlier. This has been paramount in Shaktoolik's success of being able to maintain the protect and place status as a community as a whole without hiring a bunch of outside contractors. So this equipment acquisition was very important for the community. Some other projects that they're working on to protect in place, or the actual construction projects, are the community berm. That is the berm that we talked about earlier that was destroyed by Murbach. We also have the first and second bin berm. So that's, if you recall from the beginning of the where we showed the picture of Shaktoolik, we talked about first and second bin. That's kind of their vulnerable point when it comes to evacuation or during a disaster from the community to get to higher ground. And then we also have the escape route lighting project and the tower project, which I'll talk about those in a little bit more detail. So we can go to the next slide, please. So one of the planning studies that Bristol did for Shaktoolik was to help them understand what options were there for reinforcing the berm. I had mentioned before that the berm is a soft erosion feature that gets destroyed during significant storm events and has to be rebuilt. So the community, rightfully so, once, you know, what we hear is we want armor rock. So armor rock would be something that was similar to the Cape Nome jetty, which is the picture down in the bottom right. So what we did is we understood that they wanted armor rock, but I mentioned it before, the biggest hurdle for the community was the cost of the project. So Bristol did an analysis. We looked at some different options for protecting this community berm. The first one was we just evaluated, or let me roll this back. So when we talk about the protection cost or the project cost for a capital improvements project, what this is, engineers typically talk about that as a full project life cycle. So that's from construction, that's maintenance, and the eventual decommissioning of the project. There's different design lives that we look at for these things. In this instance, we looked at this berm on a 50-year design life. And then so once we understood our life, we looked at these different protection options. So you'll see that the first one is protection using local materials. And when we evaluated that berm as it sits over a 50-year design life, considering all the reconstructions and stuff, you know, that came out to about a $10 million project. If the community wanted, and I should also say that this design or this life cycle does not include any potential damages to anything beyond the facility itself, or in this case, the berm. So this is just talking about the berm. So the other thing we tried to look at some options to help make the berm stronger and put some costs together with what that might be. So you'll see that the next alternative that we have here is the geotube berm, and that's the picture on the upper right. Those are geotubes. So that came in at about $20 million. We also looked at sheet pile walls. Those are down on the bottom left-hand corner. That was about a $50 million project. We also looked at these hybrid berm designs that would include both armor rock, but in this case, these are concrete blocks at the bottom, and that's in the bottom center. That's a picture from UT which they recently did this project. And then, so you have the geotube berms and the concrete, and then on the right is the Cape Nome jetty, which has full armor rock around the whole thing. And so the takeaway from the study is, while Shaktoolik really wants armor rock, that is the best solution and the most robust solution. That came with a pretty healthy price tag of $90+ million. I mean, here we have it, it's 88, but it's a $90 million project. So very, very expensive. Next slide, please. Okay, so one of the things that we wanted to look at, so hard rock is a very important thing for the community. We know it works, but it's very expensive. So the community has access to what they call, or on their tribal lands, is the Cape Denby. And that's what's shown here on the map. What you don't see is Shaktoolik, which is about, I think it's about 7 miles to the off the page back towards to the right. And quick shout out, the picture there when we went to look at Cape Denby, that is Jolene's husband, Jeff. So I had to throw him in there. So anyways, one of the things that we're trying to help Shaktoolik understand is, can we get rock, can they source some local rock where they don't have to pay these crazy prices? Can we get it to there cheaper? They identified this potential rock quarry. We went and looked at it as a very high level planning effort, and it definitely has some potential. But the downfall or the challenge is, one, it comes with a pretty significant development cost, $5 to $7 million to get in and start producing rock. And then it also comes with the challenge of, how do you get it to the community? So as we have it shown now, it comes down, it gets stockpiled, and then barged to the community. Some other ideas that we talked to the community about were building ice roads. And I'm going to have to start going fast because I see we're running out of time here. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So this is the one, berm construction. This is what the tribe does every single year. They go in and build the berm and rebuild and do maintenance. These are just a couple of pictures from, I think it was 2020 for the NIFWF grant. You can see a picture of the new rock truck that was purchased by the NIFWF grant, and just the one on the left is their borrow pit. And I would like to mention for the berm construction, it is it's relatively inexpensive when compared to other protection options for keeping that gravel or that sand berm maintained. But the challenge that Shaktoolik is starting to face is they're running out of sand. They're running out of material to build the berm. So it's going to become more critical to try to figure out other options for protecting the community. Next slide, please. So this is another project that we did to help the community protect in place. This was placing navigational lighting along the Shaktoolik River. So during times of significant storms, basically all this land that you see here floods. And what the community wanted to do was to be able to leave the community, go up the river and hide in their cabins, or go be safe in their cabins in higher ground away from the storm events. So what we did is we worked with the community to develop some Coast Guard navigational lights to go up the river. And that has all been completed and constructed, and they sit there and blink at night, and it's really a cool little thing. So these lights were damaged and partially destroyed during Merbach, which the community has already went and reconstructed. Next slide, please. So the next project, or another project that the tribe is using to protect in place, is the construction of a tower to place some cameras on the top of for berm monitoring, specifically during storm events. So when the storms get the scariest for the community is typically at night, because they can't see what's going on. They don't know what's happening. So the premise of this tower and the cameras this tower is located right in the middle of the berm. So there would be 2 cameras, one facing each direction. And the cameras themselves are going to be infrared, so they can see the storm in real time during the night. They can understand if the berm is still there or gone. And so if the berm is gone, they can understand if they need to take additional actions to move on, or whatever emergency measures are needed. In addition to that, the cameras are very useful for the coastal engineering team, so they can check their models, look at wave run-ups, and look at all these things that may happen with the storm event. And again, if I didn't mention it, the community is partnering with DGGS, Department of Geological Geophysical Surveys, based out of Alaska, to get some cameras installed up top. So, next slide, please. So the Golder report, so the decision to protect in place versus going into a managed retreat, that decision was really fueled by the Golder report that I mentioned earlier. And what the Golder what the Golder Report told the community was that the threats from coastal flooding and erosion were manageable over the next 20 years. From 20 to 50 years, I don't remember the exact language, but essentially they were manageable with considerable effort. And then after 50 years, the threats were almost unmanageable, and that the flooding and the storms were anticipated to get worse. So the Golder Report was extremely important in informing the community of the potential timelines that they have to start this migration process, and really was important in helping the community understand that the managed retreat was imminent. It had to happen, and they needed to start planning. And with that, I'm going to hand this over to Jolene to finish it off.
So
I
living
think
along the coastline, we have no gravel roads to lead us into a safe place. All the higher ground is miles out of town at foothills. Evacuation is not always feasible due to storm timing and the lack of places to go. 13 miles south is the base of the foothills. This is where our leadership would like to build the safety access road. But with coastal erosion, the first and second bend is also susceptible to storm events and needs to be considered. Merbok threatened this area significantly. During the Merbok storm, this is our first and second bend road that we have that goes to the foothills, and it was covered in wood. And you can see in the background further, the water just receding over the land.
so for Shaktoolik, the safety access road is our first priority. Realizing that we need to keep this spot, our community was awarded a HUD IT grant to help build a berm in front of the first and second bend, and this road would lead to a possible migration site. Where will we go? This is a picture of Shaktoolik looking towards foothills, and as you can see, we are similar to this photo. Looks a lot like the Homer spit, but we are on a spit here, and we're like I said earlier, our safety access road is our first priority. Next slide, please. Preparation for a managed retreat. Shaktoolik was awarded a 4 million BIA Tribal Climate Resiliency Grant to support this effort. We are advancing planning studies for the managed retreat, prioritizing the safety access road. Community involvement, understanding is important in decision making, and our community triorg guides the process. We have plans in phases, and safety access road is phase 1. Learned, Mother Nature always wins. Our slush berm protects the main berm. Importance of beginning proactive as a community. Using own resources and labor and materials, purchasing equipment to support our own, using own resources, and our triorg, the community working together. Value in external partnerships like ANTHC, Bristol, Coeric, and others. Next slide.
So this brings us to the end of our slideshow. And I did see some questions that were in the chat box. Isaac had directed them to. So one of the questions that was asked was by Joey Billy. Is ryegrass native to the area and not an invasive vegetation?
Yeah, really good question. So the ryegrass is native to the area, and when the community worked on the ryegrass, the vegetative planting of the ryegrass as part of the NIFWIF project, the ryegrass was actually harvested from the gravel pit or the sand pit on the top before they excavated the material. So they essentially went and got the grass, brought it to the site, and then they took all the sand below. So it was really cool in that the harvesting of the grass did not open up or make anything more vulnerable. It was part of the gravel extraction or the sand extraction process. So it was very neat.
Another question that was asked by Joey Billy, the grants team and conditions to the burn project, was it specific to areas for the population area only?
Yeah, so that is also a really good question. And what we found in a lot of these projects, in Shaktoolik in particular, that it's important to do phasing or have the ability to phase projects. And so the berm itself in front of Shaktoolik, it's about I think it's about 7,000 linear feet, 7,500 linear feet. So it's a mile and a half or so. So some of the grants that Shaktoolik went after, the grant funding couldn't cover the whole berm. So what we did was actually prioritized areas in the community that were the most critical. Like, for instance, the school was considered critical infrastructure. So on some of these grants where there wasn't quite enough funding to work on the whole berm, we really focused on these critical pieces. Again, the school was one, the power plant was another, the fuel tank farm was one, and then there was one other in there somewhere. But yeah, it is important to understand your most vulnerable areas and to allocate funding or resources there first, and then expand up beyond that once more funding becomes available.
And Caitlin Demoski asked, National Fish and Wildlife grants usually have a habitat component to them. Can you speak more to how the berm contributed to improving wildlife habitat? Or how did you meet the grant requirements for benefiting fish and wildlife?
Yeah, so I remember that specifically as we worked through the application process. So while the berm did not create habitat per se, what it did is it protected significant amounts of habitat. And the Fish and Wildlife Berm project in particular focused on the protection of these critical areas, and one of them was the bulk fuel tank farm in the community. So by protecting the bulk fuel tank farm, we were protecting the habitat behind that. That is the approach that Shaktoolik used to check that box.
And another question by Opik Akinga, is Shaktoolik planning to reconstruct the berm, maybe using boulder rocks on the sides of the waterways?
Yeah, so the Shaktoolik berm is a continuous reconstruction effort at this point. As mentioned before, it's a soft erosion berm. I mentioned the berm upgrades project that we talked about, or one of the big planning projects that we've done. So we recognize that the community, it's difficult to secure funding for $100 million worth of arbor rock. But what Shaktoolik faces the most on a continuous cycle is the little nitnoy storms that come through and eat away at the toe of the berm. So what we're looking to do right now, particularly as part of the Murbach recovery effort through hazard mitigation funds from FEMA, we're looking at providing some toe protection. So we won't be able to get, $100 million to put full armor rock in there, but we're hoping to get, $5 to $10 million to at least protect the toe, to help alleviate that continuous maintenance and that continuous expenditure of funds that Shaktoolik has to do to keep that berm in place.
And another question by George Yaska, have you considered sinking old ships on the coast?
That is a really cool one, and we didn't necessarily think about sinking old ships, but that could be really cool. What we did talk about a little bit is some off-sea barriers, particularly hard rock barriers. And the conclusion that we came to is those offshore reefs, so to speak, costs just as much or more than actually building or actually putting hard rock on the face of the berm. So I really like your, that's a really good idea that we didn't consider, and maybe we could get the Navy to drop some ships out there and provide some artificial reefs and some protection. That's really cool.
And then Nicholas Parlado, curious what Shaktoolik's relationship with the State Department of Community and Regional Affairs. Have their programs been helpful for the community?
Yeah, so DCRA will always help a community if they ask. We have reached out to them for some support. They are not they're very helpful. They're not necessarily proactive in that you have to go ask them for help, but when they are asked for help, they are extremely helpful.
Another question by Julian Jacobs. Are there any considerations to add a resolution to or possible add revisions to include climate change mitigation as well as draw support in UN mechanisms as well as coordination with agencies like IITC?
So I don't know if I have a really good answer to that, but I can say that we being Shaktoolik, they're always looking to build new partnerships. And I don't know, I'm not familiar with the resources that was mentioned in the question, but the community is always looking for people to help, always looking for partnerships. And I think there's a lot of good opportunities here to build these relationships and help everybody.
That was all the questions in the chat. Is there anybody else that had any questions that are? Well, if there are no questions, I'd like to thank everybody for participating and our presenters. Okay. So Rita did mention that Shaktoolik needs a port water breakthrough, which would help stop erosion and control storm surges. And we need armor rock, where lives are at stake. Money should be no problem because it takes years to relocate. Do you have a question? Or- Well, there's one question in the chat that came up. How are you all preparing for the Trump admin budget cuts?
Yep, really good question. So fortunately, we have not seen those budget cuts yet. So we are moving forward as usual. But I guess we're gonna have to deal with that if it comes. We did identify the need to get some of these grants executed sooner than later, so the Treasury does not pull back any funds. So that's one of the strategies that Shaktoolik has taken, just to make sure that when the grants do come through, that we are very proactive in getting back to the funding agency and making sure that we get those agreements in place so the funding is secured. Timelines are critical on that.
This is Melinda, and I know we're just about out of time. Jolene, I just have a sort of a comment / question. And it sort of picks up on that last question about, potential budget cuts. And I'm just curious from Genevieve's perspective and even yours, Jolene, living and being there and from the community, given the fact that you already have this strong tri-org working relationship that meets regularly, and the fact that you've had plenty of practice, right? It just seems like the community who initiated building the berm first and foremost before a lot of funding came in and before new equipment came in. It just seems like you are in a position that if funding got cut, you have experience, and you also have leadership that knows how to pull together. I don't know if you have any comments about that from your perspective.
And then did you want to answer?
Well, one thing that we has been hindering our efforts a little bit is we do have BIA grants that we have been trying to close out. And in previous years, we did apply for BIA funding, but because we had several grants that we were working on at the time that hadn't been closed out, we were not funded, unfortunately. But Shaktoolik has been proactive, and we will continue to seek funding. There may be some future funding cuts, but that will not stop us from trying to seek funding to keep our berm to protect in place. Did that answer your question, Melinda?
Yeah, I just, what I hear is perseverance and keep going, right?
That's so true. And one thing that Shaktoolik has, since I moved back in 2015, Shaktoolik is, if we, one thing that I noticed about the community is when they make up their minds to do something, whether, they'll get it started on their own. We've been doing all this berm work with local hire, and our tri-org is just awesome in providing us guidance through this whole process. So having a very active tri-org who supports, being very supportive is so helpful.
Great. Thank you.
I did
Welcome.
see Rita had what happened to the stay and defend.
So, yeah, Rita, good question about what happened to stay and defend. So the guidance that we have received from the Tri-org to date is that the community is still in a protect and defend status. They have not changed their status on what they're doing. But what the Tri-org has told us that they understand that they will have to migrate eventually. And they directed the administrative teams to start preparing for that migration. So that, if we follow New Talk stories and others, it's a very, very, very long process, right? So Shaktoolik is just at the beginning of a 20+ year process for that migration to the foothills or wherever. So while they are currently protecting in place, there is the understanding in the community that they're not going to be able to do that forever. And the community is being proactive and understanding what that eventual migration means.
Okay, we're getting pretty near 12:15. I'd like to thank you all for coming to the presentation and joining us today. And I'd also like to thank some of our task members, Isaac and Jenna. Thank you too.
Thank you, Jolene. You did an awesome job.
Thank you for inviting me. This was fun.